Welcome into Frogs Today and FrogsToday.com pregame show presented by Veritex Bank. We're coming to you from the park on South Lamar. I'm David Bowden, joined by Marshall Newhouse, Texas Christian University's great Marshall Newhouse, and former NFLer. I guess former NFL, you're always part of that club, aren't you?
Yeah, I guess it never goes away. But recently retired, but once a frog, always a frog.
That's right, and so great crowd, great event tonight, and we're going to break down this game coming up tomorrow. It's a big one for your 9-0 Horned Frogs. Really excited about that, and we're going to get into that tonight. Texas is coming in tonight with averaging 30.1 points a game, giving up 31 points a game, and for the Horned Frogs, they've scored 36 points a game, and really only giving up 24. Marshall, when you look at that defense, it's surprising, really. I mean, I think it's because of some of those big halves that they've had, but they've really made great adjustments.
Yeah, so it's definitely been a tale of two halves. TCU is getting off to some slow starts, allowing explosive plays. You're looking at broken tackles and things that kind of mount up, get you behind the eight ball, especially when your offense isn't clicking on all cylinders. But something about Coach Gillespie, something about Sonny Dykes and their staff going into halftime, huddling up, making adjustments, and they're really putting the clamps down on the defensive end in the second half, and also the offense is turning up. So you'd like to turn that spigot a little sooner to start the game, not really get behind like that, but TCU has shown the ability to adjust and come back from what were some pretty big deficits to ranked opponents, and people are starting to see that there's some merit to that, even though it's not the most likely way you'd like to win.
Yeah, for sure. They've shown those adjustments. They've also been in big games this year at 9-0, right? Some comeback victories. But this is the second time Texas is hosting game day. Game day's in town here in Austin, and for the second time for Texas. But it's also the second time that TCU will play in game day. They had that game at Kansas, which was a really great environment. Yep. Great crowd. They were into it. So they're used to these big games. And of course, last week, we had big noon kickoff in town, and so they're no stranger to these big-time atmosphere, big-time games. Are your fourth-ranked Horned Frogs?
Yeah, kickoff tomorrow at 6:30. The lights will be bright. There's a lot of purple coming down I-35 to see the Frogs play. This is a ranked matchup, so much on the line, but these guys have shown their ability to take these big games in stride and really show up. At the end of the day, win or lose, you want guys to show up, but TCU has found a way to win, and people, have stopped holding that against them. It feels like you finally, with the number 4 ranking, it feels like there's respect given for TCU. Now it's about, all right, you've gotten some respect. Now you have to go and earn it against a formidable opponent, lots of talent in their place at night. All the cards are stacked against you, but can you show up? And I believe TCU will. They got a senior-laden group, a lot of experience, both from the quarterback position all the way down, and it'll be something that's going to have to show up on Saturday night for sure.
Yeah, there is a lot of experience. We've talked about the adjustments, the big games. Something surprising for me, I understand it's a road game for the Horned Frogs, but this line started at 6.5 and now at 7.5 points. Why do you think such the big spread? They're fourth ranked in the country. To me, you talk about disrespect. Being 7.5 point underdogs as the fourth ranked team in the country, to me, it starts right there.
Yeah, definitely, and we're talking about national branding, kind of baked into these Vegas spreads. Listen, if you're a betting person, you've seen this stuff all the time. You bake in about 3 points for a home team. That makes sense, but I think we're looking at, unfortunately, recruiting rankings being applied to game day scores and lines. Vegas has done very well. They do these things not by the seat of their pants, so there's some merit to it. But you also have to believe that they could be beholden to recruiting rankings and the perceived level of talent or this disparity of talent between TCU and Texas. But as we all know, on game day, talent matters less, and it's about who performs better on that day. And not to mention, TCU has their own stock of talent. Mainly Quentin Johnston, who's going to be a first-round pick, projected first-round pick, Kendre Miller, Travius Hodges-Tomlinson, guys all over the field in every position group who can match up to this Texas team. So, again, I wouldn't get too wrapped up in it, but they have their lines for a reason. They're trying to sway the money that's being wagered. I mean, so much of that is directly tied to the actual product on the field, but so much of it has nothing to do with the product on the field. So I wouldn't get too wrapped up in that. At the end of the day, two teams have to go out and play, and TCU has to go out and earn a win here at DKR tomorrow night.
Yeah, I think you make a good point in terms of recruiting rankings. They certainly, out of high school, don't have that names, those big names, but they've earned the right to have those names now, right? The names you just mentioned, of course, and the way Max Duggan's playing, I think, that Heisman talk, I'm not saying he's going to win it, but him being in New York, I think is absolutely, it should be the case. He's producing that week in and week out. And so you have the name recognition in terms of players on the field now, maybe not out of high school. So for that to linger so long is surprising to me. But again, that's why they play the games, and we'll find out tomorrow. But I think they're going to turn a lot of heads tomorrow if they can come out and do this in DKR. In that stadium, though, Marshall, again, going back to those big games, this isn't a group that is, this isn't a foreign environment to them. They've had consecutive sellouts now at home, which has been great. But on the road, they've drawn some big names as well and great environments. So I don't think this is a case where they're walking into DKR tomorrow and think they're intimidated or, it's going to be the moment's too big for them. I don't think that's the case. And again, it goes back to that experience that TCU has.
Yeah, they have a lot of guys also with just confidence. Confidence in their performance so far. They're 9-0 for a reason. We talked about it all year, the regime change, building back up the confidence, and guys who are playing for each other who have bought into a new system with Sonny Dykes leading the way. Offensive led by Garrett Riley, defense led by Coach Gillespie, and a strength staff, a recovery staff, a health staff led by Coach Kaz. So there's been a lot of buy-in. That stuff doesn't show up on money lines and all this stuff, but you can see it when you're near and around the team. It's allowed them to have moxie. Listen, a lot of lesser teams, when you're down 14 to Oklahoma State, kind of let go of the rope. A lot of teams, when you're down to K-State was just a buzzsaw. They had a backup quarterback who we can argue is as good as a starting quarterback, who TCU had no time to prep for, came in, was playing lights out, and TCU still found a way to come back. So at the end of the day, the results at the end of the game are what matters. TCU are guys that they don't flinch. They look each other in the eye. It seems like they get a sense of togetherness as their adversity hits. So there's a group of guys who are battle-tested who I think just won't flinch. They're ready for this moment. And at the end of the day, they're going to have to perform, show up, play for each other, play 60 minutes, maybe a little more. I mean, this line is close. We'll talk about final predictions. I think it's going to be a close game. I imagine overtime for me would not be a surprise. And so you've got a group of guys led by Max Duggan who's got 30-plus starts. I mean, he's just a consummate pro. And guys all over the field who we've had them after the game who just continue to preach. They're holding each other accountable, not to mention the coaches. They've got each other's backs, but they're keeping each other kind of up to date with how they perform, how they prepare. Guys talking about hydration. I don't remember guys when I was playing hold each other accountable by how much water they're drinking and how ready they are for practice, how ready they are for games. So this seems like a team that is very much player-led, and that can directly be contributed to the experience they've had, but also that can be directly correlated to a game Saturday night that's going to be the biggest one all year.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I agree with you across the board in terms of the details put in, right? They put in this coaching staff, and you mentioned the strength staff, and that can't be overlooked. This is a staff that covers every single detail. We heard Coach Sonny Dykes, and we're going to hear from him a little bit from his press conference this week, his opening for the opening week. But, he talked about, gaining an extra half hour of sleep. He says, okay, this point in the year, this is when bodies start to break down and guys start to, and he wants to take care of their physical and mental health. And he said, that cumulative 2 hours a week really could pay off. So just taking care of those things, making those tweaks, starting practice in the morning, a half hour later, they met as a staff, they talked about it, they talked about the value that would bring to the staff, and then they went ahead and did it. Just, again, another small thing, a small detail of taking care of these players. You mentioned hydration, the training table. They're all over these guys on their exactly on their weight, making sure that they're eating the right things, they're eating on schedule. Kaz, the strength coach, he goes crazy if a guy doesn't have his water bottle with him at all times, because they understand that that can affect soft tissue injuries and all those things. And so this is a group that is prepared, and I want to kind of just expand on that a little bit. Wasn't planning on this, but I was thinking you also mentioned those halftime adjustments and sort of coming back and winning those games where other teams might have folded. And you're right. I think it's experience, but I also think when everything starts from the top. And when you walk in that locker room at halftime, this is a group where they've been behind in a bunch of games. And there is total calmness, right?
Yeah.
They have composure. Everybody walks around this locker room understanding that, look, we have what it takes in this locker room to get it done. We have to make a few tweaks, a few adjustments. We have to play our brand of football, and they come out and it's shown. Now it's not ideal. You don't want to get down in those situations,
of course.
but it's so nice to have the confidence and have the experience of a group that knows they can come back and win.
What's the expression? Life is 20% what happens to you, 80% how do you respond to it. These are guys on the sideline when things are going well, in the locker room at halftime when things are going well. There's just not panic. There's not guys turning on each other, and that's something that can't be taken for granted. I've been in places where that's not the case, and all it takes is some adverse half, adverse quarter, and guys act like they haven't been preparing with each other for months and months and months. So it's something to be said. It's something that's going to have to show up again on Saturday. This is not going to be just an easy sled game. We're out here at the park, this lovely establishment, a little bit of outdoor exposure. It's going to be cold tomorrow. It might be a little wet tomorrow. There's going to be adverse conditions. Texas is going to have talent. They're going to make big plays. How do you respond to those moments as a team and as an individual is what makes you a team that can be formidable, that is 9-0, that's looking to go to 10-0.
Yeah, they talked about Saturday's kickoff. The wind chill could get down in the 30s. Again, one more thing.
That's football weather, baby.
That's right. And these are the things that they're going to rely on their training, right? And I think that's what builds that confidence. One, it's the repetitions. It's the age. And we're going to talk about that a little bit here later. But it's also the fact that they feel prepared, right?
Yeah.
And when they know they prepared, they're taking care of their bodies, then all those outside distractions, it doesn't matter at that point. You know what I mean? They can put those aside and just worry about football. So we're going to talk a lot more about football here. Coming up, though, we're going to listen to Chris Del Conte, the Texas Longhorn athletic director, former TCU athletic director. He sat down with our own Frogs Today, Brian Estridge, back in the studio. Take a look.
Team's starting to play a lot better too, man. Putting it together, a lot of talent there. Give me some sense. Are you starting to see fans sort of rally behind this group now?
You know, it's interesting. It's a super, super young team, Brian. Our average age of our team is 19.2. We played against Kansas State last week, and they're 23.6 years old on age. So when you start to think about it, it's like TCU back in the day playing BYU. TCU is a really old team. You have a lot of juniors and seniors. That team is old, has a chance to be great. Got a phenomenal quarterback. You got Sonny, all the storylines around the transition, what is taking place. It's just fantastic, and I'm happy for everybody. I'm happy for us in terms of the recruiting the young kids to get a chance to play for us. I'm happy for what's taking place in college football. It should be a good weekend.
Yeah, it's good for the Big 12, too, as a matter of fact, to see the eyes of the nation on it like this. We talked to Sonny about this just the other week. He was going up against Rhett Lashley, who was a former assistant, formed at SMU. And the way college athletics is today, it is so fraternal, it's hard not to go up against friends, and that's never fun, is it?
Oh, what's crazy is, remember, I used to work with Sonny's brother at Arizona, Rick.
Right.
And then when Sonny came to Arizona, I was at Rice and TCU. And when Sonny was going to get ready to leave Arizona to go to from Louisiana to go to get two offers, Cal and Purdue. We met in New York City. I said, "Hey, don't take Cal. You're better suited for Purdue." I thought he was more like Joe Tiller, who I used to work for back at Washington State. He decides to go to Cal when that job did not go as well as he'd like it. He was coming for a new opportunity. I said, "Gary, we got to bring in Sonny as an analyst." Gary allowed that to happen. He was there for a year, then goes to SMU. So there's so many familiar stories that we've been together for so long that Kate just called me right now and busted my chops for putting her up so high in the stadium that she needs the Hubble telescope to see the field. I'm like, Kate, why are you busting me right now? Just get through the weekend. We'll talk on Sunday.
That's right. We'll visit after the game. Speaking of Gary, you added Coach Patterson to the football staff there as an analyst or a special assistant to the head coach. That transition seems to have worked out well too.
Well, it's interesting. That was really a funny situation when Jeremiah and TCU decided to make a change, and that's always hard for everybody. And I have great love for what the TCU is and the program they have, and at the same time with Gary, and that happened. We had a long chat, and I said, "Gary's going to leave a conversation with you and Steve." And he and Steve met. It was funny. Steve called me, but "Do you think he'll come?" I said, "Steve, that's a conversation between you and Gary," because I wanted to make sure that was a conversation. They took almost 2 months to figure out this is something they wanted to do, and I'm happy for him just to kind of get out of Fort Worth, get a chance to decompress. He's a damn good coach. He's a great human being, and change is hard. And I love both him. I love Sonny. I've known Sonny longer than I've known Gary. But I had deep, intimate relationships with Gary when I was in we went through a lot of battles when I was with him at TCU. So for him, a chance to come down here, decompress, and just re-energize his body. It's great to watch him and see him. But he, those student athletes there at TCU recruited all of them, a lot of them. And those are, this is a big game for him emotionally. Just the fact that he invested so much at TCU, and you look at the stadium behind you there, Brian. His DNA is all over that stadium, and there's a statue up for them. And at some point in time, he'll be welcomed back home, and he'll feel great about what he did there.
Welcome back into Frogs Today, FrogsToday.com pregame show presented by Veritex Bank. Again, I'm David Bowden, sitting alongside Marshall Newhouse. And, we just listened to Chris Delconte, the athletic director now for Texas, of course, former TCU athletic director. And he talked about this Texas Longhorn team and about the youth on this team. They said the average age of this roster for the Texas Longhorns is 19.2. Of course, when you look at that Horned Frog roster, a lot of experience, a lot of games behind it. Max Duggan has started now 39 games under his belt. And you look on that Longhorn sideline, you see Quinn Ewers, who's a redshirt freshman, really should be just a true freshman because of his age. He's a guy who forego his senior year of high school and went to Ohio State early. Should have been a senior in high school, a full year early, and then transferred into Texas. He's starting now. So, really two different tales in terms of the captain on offense, kind of running the show. And so you're going to get two different feels. And I think what comes with that is they have to start kind of dumb things down a little bit for a younger quarterback, Marshall, as opposed to Max Duggan, where they can just kind of let it rip. Yes, it's a new offensive coordinator, offensive system, but clearly Max Duggan has settled in nicely.
Yeah, I mean, it's a stark difference, definitely. But I think Quinn Ewers has all the talent in the world, and like you mentioned, is still very, very raw, very green, and he makes a lot of mistakes. I mean, last week he had 2 interceptions. He makes mistakes with all the arm talent in the world. TCU is going to be in position where he's going to throw you a couple, and can you come down with him? Are you going to have the guys who are in position? Are they going to have the hands to come down with the interceptions? Listen. Max Duggan himself has a lot of growing pains. We watched him over these years kind of grow into his role, grow into be a QB who's a leader, who's a good decision maker, and that doesn't come lightly. That comes with experience, a lot of bruises, a lot of scars, and Quinn Ewers just doesn't have that yet. He's got all the talent in the world in his arm, and he's mobile as well. He can do a lot of things in and out of the pocket. But Coach Joe Gillespie is going to have an opportunity here to throw some things at him that he's not used to seeing. They're going to try to lean on Bijan Robinson, it feels like. But at the end of the day, third and longs, how do you convert third and longs? You need a quarterback who can make great decisions. You need receivers who can get open. And that comes down to Quinn Ewers being the guy who's making those decisions. So he's shown us a little bit high ceiling. But, again, he's made some mistakes, and there are going to be opportunities on Saturday for TCU. And on the other side, you've got Max Duggan, who we've seen, at times look like he's just dialed in completely, and at times a little bit, off here and there. Even for a senior, just playing quarterback, it goes to show you how hard that is. And we're talking about the Texas defensive coordinator who's got a lot of experience and who is remaining nameless. PK is the guy's name.
Yeah, Pete Kwiatkowski.
Pete Kwiatkowski,
yes,
who's
sure.
almost been nameless, but people want to talk about Gary Patterson, and I get that. Coach Patterson is assistant to the head coach.
Yep.
He's added a lot of context, game planning for teams and defenses and players and personnel. He knows Max Duggan well. He recruited Max Duggan. I would imagine he was and still is Max Duggan's biggest fan. He's going to know all of his flaws. He's going to know how to trip him up. That is going to be his goal for Saturday. But at the end of the day, he is not the guy running the defense. He's not the guy calling the plays. He'll be on the sideline helping with adjustments. You're going to have Garrett Riley, I think, is the guy who I think has a lot of pressure on him. You're going to have to make a game plan and execute a game plan that allows Max to make quick decisions, get the ball out of his hands, and kind of not play into the tendencies that I know Coach Patterson has told the Texas defense about. They all know, where his eyes are. They all know his tendency after the first or second read, and you're going to have to scheme a lot of play action in, a lot of motion. We've got Darius Davis running on the jet motion. We've got ghost motion. Tay Barber moving all over the place. Quentin Johnston moving all over the place. A lot of what we call eye candy. This is a lot of formation variation, movement pre-snap, to give Max Duggan the clearest picture possible to go into Saturday and make good decisions. That's what this is about. TCU is a top 10 offense and explosive plays, but decision-making for 4 quarters is what will win you this game. And so, again, Garrett Riley getting in position, starting fast, making smart decisions early on. That, to me, those accrue. Those stack. You get a guy building confidence in game. He might have confidence in the macro sense all season, but you get him building confidence in game about where he's going with the ball, how his hands feel. Tomorrow's going to be cold. Can he get a grip on the ball? I think Max Duggan has shown he can play in adverse conditions, but it's not a given. All these guys will be adjusting to adverse climate situations. And so, again, an experienced player like Duggan, you hope, can adjust faster. A younger guy in Quinn who's, again, a redshirt freshman, but younger even than that. Yeah. How is he going to respond to a defense, a very multiple defense that's going to throw a lot at him?
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, this is the Frogs Today pregame show presented by Veritex Bank, and we're here at the park on South Lamar in Austin, and we want to make sure if you're here, make sure you ask any kind of questions. We have a segment to answer your questions on Twitter at Frogs Today, hashtag Game Day Questions. So at Frogs Today, hashtag Game Day Questions. We'll answer any questions about tomorrow's game and your Horned Frogs. Anything that you got, throw it at us, Marshall. We'll try our best to answer it.
Yeah, well, anything, safe for work, we'll get it on air.
That's right. And so you talk about Quinn Ewers, and the thing is about him is they will do a lot of things with him. For a redshirt freshman, they will do a lot. Steve Sarkisian's a guy. Kyle Flood is their offensive coordinator by title, but really this is a Sark run offense. Yes. And he's a guy that's going to do a ton of things, especially in the first half. So we've seen from, it's really the two different teams. It's kind of, this is the scary part if you're a Horned Frog fan, and that is, this is a team that, for Texas, who starts really fast in the first half, jumps out to early leads, and of course we've seen the Horned Frogs fall behind in the first half. Yeah. Okay, and a lot of that comes down to the Texas offense schemes you up early. They throw all kinds of formations. We broke down the game this week.
To add context, sorry to interrupt.
No,
that's an NFL thing. The NFL is known on offense for scripting. We call it scripted plays. The first or second drive, almost every play is scripted, where if you stay ahead of the chains, you stay on time, these plays are already known by the offense, by the offensive coordinator. It allows you to get in a rhythm. And so there's usually going to be your best calls of the game. At least of your best 90% of the calls are going to be the ones that you think you can get a guy wide open here, go against the weakness of the defense. And so you're going to allow Quinn Ewers to also play faster earlier on. That's what's allowed them to get out to these big leads. And like you said, very dangerous for TCU. Continue.
No, yeah, for sure. And so, of course, Steve Sarkisian has that experience, the offensive coordinator for the Falcons, for the time. So he's got some NFL, roots and experience. And a lot of that, too, like you said, Marshall, is not only running your stuff, but also seeing, okay, if I line up in all these different formations, I look at the first 6 plays, and, it's certainly scripted. How are they
going to react?
Those first 6 plays for Texas last week, completely different looks. They had condensed formations, spread, different motions, unbalanced, play action, RPO, all in the first 6 plays. Yep. And so, they're really trying to stress you early and just trying to see how you're going to line up to different things and basically what your defensive game plan is. Right. And so that's going to be a tell for them for the rest of the game. Now, the thing is, though, the Horned Frogs just have to hang in there in that first half. Sure. It's almost like a fighter. They're going to be some flurries early, and they've got to hang in there to keep it close. If they can keep it close, they've certainly shown the ability to overcome and win that thing in the second half. The other thing for Texas is, on that offense with a young quarterback, there's only so much you can put on his plate. So if you let him have that flurry early, they're going to settle into a quote-unquote base offense, right? Yeah. They're going to start handing the ball to those 2 running backs, and we're going to get into that offense here in the next segment. But, with Bijan and Roschon Johnson, Bijan Robinson, these are 2 top-tier running backs. Of course, TCU has one as well in Kendre Miller, but to me, that's going to be the thing is, can they withstand that flurry early from this offense? But again, when you look at Quinn Ewers, the young quarterback, they can't put, they can only do so much. After those scripted series, they've got to kind of settle into who they are, right? And so, that's the thing. Can you force field goals? Can you do things like that early on in the game to keep it within striking distance? And I think that's where, if they can do that, that's where TCU has their best shot of winning this thing.
Absolutely. TCU, a team that's grown accustomed to falling behind the games early, not something that you would like to see, and diametrically opposed to Texas, which has gotten off to hot starts on offense. And like Coach Dave said, just holding tide, holding the rope, keeping things close, staying in it, taking your shots, absolutely, running your offense, running your scheme, but not letting things get out of hand, because we've seen TCU on the edge of things really get out of hand and be able to fight their way back. That's just not a sustainable way of playing football. It's not a way you can go in and out of the weeks and rely on. It's been great. They've been amazing comebacks, but that's not how good football teams continue to play. You find ways to win. Absolutely, TCU's done that, but against a team as talented as Texas, you can't have that much leeway. There's just not that much room for error. And so, again, giving Quinn outside of their scripted plays into the base offense, keeping things in front of them, forcing them. We call it hidden yards all the time. We talk about that. Bijan Robinson, Kendra Miller are very similar in that way, that they fall forward, they fight for extra yards, and that gets you in the chance to be in 3rd and 4 instead of 3rd and 7. Absolutely. And for a young quarterback and for an offense who's trying to get their footing early in the game, those plays are so small, but they add up. Over the course of the game, they add up. They get you in better positions, higher percentage plays, higher percentage opportunities to convert 3rd down, keep the chains moving, and keep the other team off the field. And so that's, to me, plays in the entire thing, the entire equation. TCU on defense, tackling, wrapping up Bijan, not letting him fall forward, not letting him fight for extra yards, keeping Quinn in the pocket, making him beat you with his brain and with his arm, and having guys short of the first down, making them earn every bit of their offense early on so you can get yourself in position to make your strikes, take your shots downfield, and run your offense. And TCU, neck and neck, they're as good as anybody else in the country. They just got to get themselves in that position.
Yeah, you talked about Kendra Miller. He week to week almost has, all of a sudden you look at the stat sheet, last week at 158 yards, and it was a quiet 158 yards.
The most untalked about running back in college football. I can say that right now. He's got over 1,000 yards. I think he's third in yards right now. I mean, just untalked about. A guy who's been the bell cow for this TCU offense. He's closed games out. He's explosive. He can score from anywhere on the field. He can also run over your best linebacker. So he can do a little bit of everything. And, again, he's just been leading this team. At times when the team needs to be drugged, he's been dragging them by their coattails and keeping us in games. So Kendra Miller, untalked about, unspoken, a true hero of this team so far, and I expect him to have a big day tomorrow as well.
I agree. He's a guy that has, runs with pistons, his legs, high knees all the time. Nobody wants to tackle a guy like that.
No.
And so we're definitely going to talk more about him. But when we come back, we're going to talk about that Texas Longhorn offense and how it matches up against this TCU defense. We're going to get onto that. And they have a couple of running backs of their own that we're going to get into that are super talented. And really the Big 12 has become that run, a lot of running backs, which we hadn't seen in a long time. But stay tuned to Frogs Today and FrogsToday.com. We'll be right back to talk about that Texas offense, TCU defense matchup. Stay tuned.
Simply the best barbecue in Fort Worth. Dine in, catering, or drive-through. 2900 Montgomery, just off I-30. Remember, the best barbecue in Fort Worth is at Railhead Smokehouse.
The Flying T Club provides the everyday TCU fan and alum the ability to specifically support TCU student athletes. Flying T Club offers 3 levels of memberships. The Flying T Club is a nonprofit organization supporting the brand development of TCU student athletes through a series of unique event-based networking opportunities, which are exclusive to our members. These events provide a great social engagement tool for our members and student athletes alike. Follow them on Instagram at Flying T Club or online at flyingtclub.com.
Welcome back into Frogs Today and FrogsToday.com pregame show presented by Veritex Bank. I am David Bowden, joined alongside is Marshall Newhouse. I'm going to talk a little bit about this Texas offense and this TCU defense and that matchup, Marshall. Yeah. And a lot has been made about TCU's tackling, and certainly they have a couple spots where they need to do a better job. They've had some injuries on the defense and rotate some guys through, especially at that safety position and that linebacker spot, which I want to get into here today. But when you look at the numbers, Marshall, it's not as bad as I think public perception makes it out to be when you start digging into that tackling percentage, is it?
Yeah, they've definitely had their issues, and I think it's more earlier than later. And it's been against talented receivers, running backs, Deuce Vaughns of the world, guys who are slippery and hard to tackle. But according to Pro Football Focus's college analytics, TCU is ranked 44th in tackling. Texas is ranked 41st in tackling. So not a huge discrepancy here. It's not this continued stressor that we've been told it is. It is something that has to continue to improve if TCU wants to be relevant, continue in the college football playoff. But again, it's something that I think they're continuing to improve on. It's not like they're not aware. They know. And I think, the coaches are having these guys continue to work on their fundamentals, get their bodies healthy so they can just throw themselves fundamentally at ball carriers.
Yeah, I think this week again, a lot. We've of course talked about Bijan Robinson, the running back for Texas, and look, we have a great one here at TCU and Kendre Miller, but Bijan Robinson is a special running back as well. There's no denying it. And I think where they've hurt defenses after you watch the tape is really looking at, like last week you looked at Kansas State and they had the safeties insert themselves in the run fit quite a bit, but they were coming in kind of bent over at the waist, doing those kind of things. And if you're not going to come in right, and square them up and sort of run the toes of Bijan Robinson, you're in trouble. And so it's really going to be something to watch for TCU with these safeties. It's nice to have Millard Bradford back. He was back last week, kind of get his feet wet again. I think that's going to be a key for TCU. But these safeties for TCU have to do a good job. When they run the alley, they show up with a purpose and get the job done, because this isn't a guy you can arm tackle. And then his backup, right? You look at Roschon Johnson, he's a guy who was a heralded quarterback coming out of high school. His freshman year, the running back room was decimated with injuries. They moved him over just kind of out of need and necessity, and all of a sudden he's blossomed into another top running back in the Big 12. So they've got two of them over there, so they've got to make sure they take care of that. I think that's, for Texas, they've done a nice job using those guys, taking the pressure off the freshman quarterback a little bit, Quinn Ewers, but they've got to make sure they tackle well, and they know it. Like you said, it's not as bad as it's been, but it only takes one missed tackle on defense for one of these guys to get loose, and all of a sudden it's 60 yards out the gate. We saw last week against Kansas State.
Yeah, and the best run attacks. I mean, reiterate, Bijan Robinson's in his own stratosphere. He's going to go in the first round of the NFL draft. He's got the talent. That's been proven. We understand that. But he's a guy whose skill set keeps you honest as a defender. You meet him in the hole, he can run you over, he can hurdle you, he can spin, he can juke you. So your fundamentals have to be good, but you also have to be a great team at tackling. We talked about earlier in the season how TCU, they're fired up. They look like they gang tackle very well. They rally to the football, and that's going to be even more prevalent of getting off blocks and getting the second, third guy to Bijan Robinson, because he's just that powerful and he's that talented. And we talked about earlier about not preventing all these hidden yards. I mean, that's what he's an expert at. PFF, again, has the Texas offense at 36th in rush success in the country. So that's pretty good for the Big 12. Bijan Robinson leading the way. But, again, very similar on the other side. We've got a 1-2 punch. So Kendre Miller and Amari DiMercado is a 1-2 punch, and Bijan Robinson and Roschon as a 1-2 punch. So not a lot of respite for these defenses when their running backs get subbed out, because you got a guy who can take it to the house right behind him. And you talk about consistency and keeping, holding the floodgates as a TCU defense. Listen, Bijan Robinson is a patient runner. He's a talented, he's a cerebral runner, which you don't see that often. He thinks things through. And so, the first quarter might go by, you're holding him. Second quarter goes by, third quarter goes by, and then you relax in the fourth quarter and hit you for a 70-yard run. That's how it happens. Guys that talented, you can't keep them down for the entire game. You do your best, but if you fall asleep, you lax for 1 second and they're gone. And they change the tide of games. They wear you down and they change the tide of games. That's what guys like him can do. Yeah,
and you mentioned the gang tackling thing, and a lot of that is really a defense, and defense coordinator Joe Gillespie's defense has really kind of freed these guys up to just play, right? Be the great athletes that they are, run to the football, but a lot of that is leverage points for them, right? So, who's working inside out, who's working outside in. We saw that from Jamoy Hodge last week. We talked to him after the game about it, and he understands, he trusts the guys next to him that they're going to meet him there, and if he gets on an inside leverage, he understands the guy outside's going to fit the thing right. And so a lot of that quote-unquote gang tackling comes from just trusting your teammates and feeling free, right, to just run and not overthink things. The key here, though, for TCU, when you look at it with D. Winters out, a captain of that defense, who's out for the first half because being ejected last week for targeting, it was the very beginning of that second half, so that puts him out for the first half of this game. Shadrack Banks came in. He's a sophomore, transferred in from Texas A&M. Did a really nice job. He's a freak athlete, over 250 pounds. He's returned kicks, Marshall.
I've seen him back there, man. I'm not sure I'd like him running at me at full steam.
It might be the only inside linebacker over 250 pounds that I've seen return kicks in a game. I may have seen a couple scout team guys messing around back there, but we actually saw, got to see him return kicks. So you understand what kind of athlete he is. I think that won't be an issue. I think where they got to be careful is that communication piece, right? Yep. He's still a young player who's learning the position, trying to understand his reads. And you talked about eye candy early from this Texas offense, that can put a lot of pressure, on a young guy trying to still figure out the position, right? All the talent in the world, he's going to be a great player. There's no doubt. but he's got to stay disciplined on reading his keys and not getting caught up peeking in the backfield of all the jet motion they'll throw at you, the different formations, and all those kind of things. Just recognize the personnel, recognize where they're aligned in the spacing, and then from there just play football. Because if he starts to overthink things, that's when this Texas offense can get you, and that could be a concern early on in this one.
And especially early, you talked about the scripted plays. They're going to come at you like a machine gun. They're going to line up in a bunch. They're going to have a tackle over, line set, unbalanced, heavy sets. They're going to do a lot of things in the first 6 to 10 plays, and that's going to test Shadrick Banks' preparation mentally. Forget all the physical stuff. He's a physical specimen. He's got all the tools you want, but they're going to challenge him. Are his eyes in the right place? Is he getting the rest of his linebackers in the right place? Is he getting his defensive line in the right place? And then at the end of the day, are you reacting to the right things? Are your eyes honest? Are your eyes telling you the truth, and you're trusting them? And they're going to challenge him to begin the game. We're going to see how big of a gap there is as far as leadership and mental clarity when it comes to the linebacker position. I think he's got all the tools in the world. I expect him to have a big game, especially filling in for D. Winters. Listen, these guys are full of pride. A guy like him transferring from A&M, he wants to play well. He's getting his opportunity. TCU's down Marcel Brooks. They're down D. Winters for the first half. This is opportunity to show Sonny Dykes and Coach Joe Gillespie, hey, I can do this job. I can be a guy who's a game changer on defense. From that spot that D. Winters occupies, he's also going to get some pass rush opportunities. D. Winters leading TCU in sacks. You're going to get a chance to rush the passer, show what you can do against an offensive line that we've seen who struggled from Texas a little bit. So a lot of opportunity, a big day, I hope, for Shad Banks. A lot of opportunity in front of him. But, again, he's going to have his hands full, at least in the first 2 to 3 drives, especially with what Sark's going to throw at him as far as formation variation, speed. They're probably going to go a little faster. They saw what Tech did to us last week. Tech, who, if you got a pretty positive first play, they're on the ball and they're going. TCU gave up a long, explosive touchdown because they just weren't lined up right. They had a guy who they did like a switch vertical out of a trip set to the near side, a guy who's streaking down the field. Linebackers avoided the coverage, the space, safeties avoided the space, and there's a touchdown. That can happen that fast in this conference, and so it's going to take a lot of communication that he's going to have to catch up. At the end of the day, you hope that coach understands where he's at. He's just aware of what he can do and what he can't do right now. Be honest with himself and with the player about, hey, this is what I expect from you. This is what I know you can do. Let me put on your plate what I know you can do, maybe a little bit more. Give him a chance to stretch himself. But if you just throw everything at him, a thinking player is a slow player, and that's always going to be the case in football. Yeah. And so you want Shad Banks, at the very, very least, to play fast. Give him opportunities to run, use that athleticism, use that body type to play fast and make plays for you on defense.
Yeah, I think the nice thing for him, he's playing along 2 guys in that, the other 2 guys in that stack, in Jamoy Hodge in the middle and Johnny Hodges on the other side, a guy coming over from Navy who's really done a heck of a job. So, I think it's a situation where they can free him up, leave the communication to those, 2 veteran players that are lining up next to him, because there are some things, Marshall, that popped on film. There was a 3rd and 8 last week. Texas Tech really needed one. They saw that they were in sort of a drop 8, softer zone coverage, and so they checked out into a speed option. You saw from all the way to the opposite side, you saw Shadrick Banks chase that thing down. Yep. It was a gain of 4, but that's all it took, because it forced 4th and 4, and Texas Tech had a punt. TCU turned around, scored on that drive, and never looked back from that point. Right. It was all because of Shadrick Banks on the backside, just playing football. It was one of those see ball, get ball kind of deals, and that's where you have to put him in those positions where he's not making all the calls and doing those things. And, look, this is a smart staff. This is an experienced group, and they'll make sure that they do that for him so they can free him up. So I expect him to make sure, he'll be in good positions, as you said, but he's got to be careful that he doesn't get caught up peeking and looking around too much. Yeah. And, like you said, last week, all of a sudden, they ran that switch verts with the safety, and it was really because of the tempo, as you said. They just didn't get it communicated in time, and so there was a blown coverage because of it, and all of a sudden it's a touchdown. Certainly, Texas on offense has that explosive power. They have big, you go back to those recruiting rankings. One of the things that they do have, they'll have a lot of 4- and 5-star players. Now, does that always mean you're going to win the game? No, but it does give you the physical presence at a lot of different positions. And one of them is those outside receivers for Texas are big, strong guys. They look the part. They look the part of big-time recruits. They look the part of big-time college football players. And so with a lot of this coverage stuff where they're running a lot of in-breaking routes for Quinn, they've got to be physical on the outside and sort of making sure that they're walling that stuff off and not giving Quinn just easy throws over the middle, right? And so, we talked to Trey Hodges-Tomlinson after the game. He also spoke this week. He's excited. He's playing across from a guy, Josh Newton, at the other cornerback position. They call themselves the Lockdown Boys, and but they have a lot of confidence in one another that they're going to take care of business. And everyone knows that Quinn. That Trey is a little bit on the shorter side, but super physical. Obviously, tremendously gifted athletically, and just an overall really good football player. And he's gone up against some 6'5", 6'6" receivers this year and shut them down. I mean, look, he's not clearly not afraid. In fact, he welcomes the challenge. Anytime you bring it up to him, he's got a big old smile that's infectious. Because he gets excited to line up against these quote unquote 4- and 5-star guys that are big lineup on the outside.
Completely. And you've got guys, again, I talk about with pride. They want to perform just as much as anyone else, whether their star was a 1 or a 5. Listen, they're here. We've always known that Texas has been kind of the bell cow of Texas football in college. But TCU is making their own way, and these guys, whether they had offers from Texas or not, they know guys on the other side of the field. Like, this is such a familial atmosphere in Texas high school football, and then it makes its way up to the college ranks, that there's a lot of pride going on about guys who've played against each other, played in all-star games against each other, and they want to perform. Not only for the next level, there's going to be scouts here watching. There's going to be 30 recruits here watching. There's going to be such an eye on this game. But you have guys who played against each other who want to perform well against guys that they know well.
Yeah, it's a tremendous opportunity. The best opportunity, best thing about 9-0 is what, right? The opportunity to go 10-0.
Yes.
And so we're going to see that at 6:30 kickoff Saturday here in Austin. I know that these fans are fired up for it here.
Be a lot of purple.
That's right, here at the park in Austin. And so we're going to, when we get back from this break, Marshall, we're going to flip it around and take a look at that TCU offense versus the Texas defense. We're going to jump into all those things and how they match up with Max Duggan at quarterback versus this Texas defense. Stay tuned to Frogs Today. We'll have more when we get back.
Texas-based Happy Water offers the best-tasting, sugar-free kids drink ever made. Happy Water comes in 4 delicious flavors that you can find at local retailers and on Amazon. Each pouch contains 0 grams of sugar, 0 calories, and 0% juice. Head to happydrinks.com for more information and to purchase Happy Water. That's HAPI drinks.com. Live happy, be happy, drink happy.
For exclusive interviews and content on TCU recruits, subscribe now at frogstoday.com. Any sport, anytime. It's your source for all things TCU. Only on frogstoday.com.
Welcome back into Frogs Today and frogstoday.com pregame show presented by Veritex Bank. I'm David Bowden alongside Marshall Newhouse. We're here at the park on South Lamar in Austin, site of the game tomorrow, the big game with game day in town, and we've got a good one for you here, with your 4th-ranked Horned Frogs. I keep wanting to say Longhorns because I'm in Austin.
Oh, man, yeah, don't let us slip.
I got to be careful. This crowd won't take too kind to it. But, we talked about this TCU defense. I want to jump into the other side of the ball, and we touched on Max Duggan, his experience, but what it means going up against this defense. So defensive coordinator Pete Kwiatkowski is a guy who, he was with Chris Peterson at Boise State. He's a player at Boise State, went with him to Washington. And then he's a guy that actually is familiar with North Texas. He recruited that area, so he's got some familiarity with these players and certainly the players in this area. But he's a guy, I remember talking to him coming in. He was a guy who visited the Patriots quite a bit and has some influence that defense, sort of that hybrid, 3-4, 4-3, where it's odd personnel. They've got that weak outside linebacker that's a hybrid guy.
Right.
Becomes the fourth rusher by default. He can also drop into coverage. So they have some multiple fronts. But the talk, of course, and the storyline this week, Marshall, has been the return and seeing Coach Gary Patterson on the other sideline. We all know tremendous coach. We all know tremendous defensive coach. But, I want to be clear here. This is not what you see on the Longhorn defense. While he certainly has influence, he has intimate knowledge of these TCU players, this is not his defense, right? It's not his 4-2-5 out there that everyone is accustomed to. This is a Pete Kwiatkowski defense with influence from Coach Gary Patterson.
Absolutely. And, the things that it's not like he's there for no reason. They brought him on for a reason after the separation at TCU, but a lot of his influence is kind of qualitative stuff. It's not schematic stuff. It's individually player to player. He's taking guys off the side. He gets to be a little bit softer than he's normally been and just talk to him, help him grow. They're fundamentals. from each level of defense, D-line, linebacker, and DB. And he's just speaking kind of all the knowledge. He's forgotten more about football than most guys have learned. And he provides that context, and he can do it now from a different position. The players, I imagine, are a little more approachable to him, amenable to his style. Guys, they've talked about it. It's been in the news. They seem to really enjoy his presence. Him not being a head coach and having so much on his plate, I imagine, has allowed a little bit more of a personality to show. And then at the end of the day, he's also got impact on scouting teams, helping Coach Kwiatkowski put game plans together, but also scouting individual players. Because listen, Coach P, for what he was a great recruiter. He recruited a lot of the kids that are at TCU right now. He's seen all these kids in the Big 12. On lists and had them in for camps and stuff like that. So there's an intimate knowledge there about how some of these guys tick. They're all growing and changing, but to me, again, the information provides is qualitative. It's a lot of like, hey, aside from just this game, he's helped these Texas defensive guys grow. Because in the past, they've been a defense that's just been undisciplined, not super tough, maybe a little bit passive at times, and let Texas get a lot of games taken away from them. And so bringing him in allows the mindset to be affected a little bit. They're a little bit more aggressive. You can see they play a little bit more of an edge. Obviously, there's a defensive coordinator there as the prime guy, but Coach B's influence can definitely be seen in how the edge that these guys play with. So, it's something to be said. He's been there. He's had influence. It's obvious, and he's in a good position that he, I think, wanted to be in. But it's overblown, definitely, the impact that he's going to have from a schematic standpoint.
Yeah, no, that's right. When you say overblown, it's not a slight at Coach Patterson. We all know how great of a coach he is. It's really what they're saying is, and nowadays – everything's on film, Marshall, right? I mean, in the digital world, you can get every angle of every game in the country at every level, right?
Yes.
It's all there. And it's accessible. So, and you are who you are on film. And so, yes, if he was not there, they would still know who they are schematically. They still know who they are in terms of the skill level and technique and all those sort of things. Now, of course, it does help when you know a guy's mentality or some things like that they can dig into, but that can only go so far, right? So I think, yes, there's an influence, there's a presence, there's a history. It's a great storyline and all of that, but this is a really good TCU football team, that's going up against a good Texas defense. And to me, that's where it ends. I think too much can be made sometimes of, well, this is Coach Patterson's defense, and he knows his team so well, and that's true. He knows those guys well, but the defensive scheme is not his, and that can only go so far, right? In this whole thing. And so, really, when it comes down to it, when you look at this Horned Frog offense, they've got to take care of business. Especially, this is we talked about what the front is, being that sort of 3-4-3. They can move and shift to different fronts. They kick the front down a lot if you have another tight end in, right? So all of a sudden, if they're spread out, they're more of an odd look. They like to go to more odd look. Or if they stay on that odd, they'll at least kick that guy down and match him. If they bring in an H-back or a tight end to that side. Or sometimes they'll kick the front over. But the secondary is a quarters defense, right? It's a quarters match. They play a lot of palms coverage, which is, again, sort of out of that Belichick-Saban tree from a long time ago, where they'll match between either cover two or quarters. We don't have to get into all that stuff, but what it means for TCU is this, to me. In the run game, those safeties are going to be primarily a run support deal, right? They're playing flat-footed. They're not backpedaling. And they're screaming the alley.
Yes.
And because of that, these TCU wide receivers have to do a great job blocking in the run game, taking care of DeMarcado, taking care of Miller, by blocking. And the thing, what makes me feel good about this game for TCU is it's full of guys that are selfless, right? And it's going to take that for these TCU receivers to say, hey, maybe the ball's not going to come my way every time. I don't know, but if I can stick my nose in there on a safety, I might be able to spring my running back for a touchdown and take care of business and leave those corners alone on the perimeter, right? Go in and they, either spy block or what they call push crack. What that means is, run that corner off and then spy that safety, go ahead and block it. That's going to be key, especially for this TCU run game on Saturday.
I was just going to mention that, the push crack, it's great. I mean, listen, they say in the running game, great runs are great if the offensive line blocks well, but you get big runs and touchdowns when receivers block well. When you can get receivers who can get their nose in there and dig out a safety who will go and attack a corner, push them out of the sideline and really piss them off, your run game is going to thrive. It's going to flourish, and it's an attitude thing. It's usually not an ability. Those are some of the most athletic guys on the field. It's an attitude thing. It's you deciding as a receiving core and that as an individual, I'm going to run block for my guys because eventually they're going to need to block for me, whether it's a wide receiver screen or reverse or what have you. And so yeah, the receivers are a huge part of the run game. And against this cover 4 front, these guys are not the back four, the cover 4, a little bit granular into it. They are not backpedaling. They are keeping everything in front of them eyes, but they're run supporting quickly. There's a little bit less hesitation because they have so many DBs in the back. So they're filling run lanes. So if TCU, Kendra Miller is going to break a lot of tackles. You get through the first level, you got the linebackers. You get to the second level, you hope to have safeties that are filling in the gaps. And that's where the receivers being there is so important. Guys who are just putting their bodies on the line, because guess what? I would take a Kendra Miller against a DB for any team in the country who's trying to reach out his arm and tackle him by himself.
There's
Kendra
no
Miller,
question.
He can run you over, make you miss, run past you. And so having a little bit of occupation, making that guy play physical in the run game is also going to lead to him having to cover a guy like Darius Davis down the field, a guy like Quentin Johnson down the field, Tay Barber. I mean, the list goes on and on. So all these things are in marriage to each other. They work together. Receivers blocking for the run game, and then receivers blocking for each other, and then linemen, again, creating holes. All these things work in a marriage together.
Right, yeah, and I want to talk about what it also opens up down the road. So if you do that successfully and you're running and blocking those safeties, all of a sudden your play action. They run in to block the safety and then slip it, like that. Or you can run some things where you hold the safety, run the outside guy over on a post. There's a lot of things you can do in play action. But before I get into that, Marshall, as an offensive lineman, to see a TCU group that is willing at the receiver position to stick their nose in there and block, that's got to fire you up as an offensive lineman to know that, hey, man, we're all in on this thing, right? Yeah. It's not just us guys up front. This is a team effort in terms of blocking for one another. That's got to be big for you.
I mean, that's just the buy-in we keep hearing about of you've got receivers their job is to catch the ball. They're in the passing game. But guess what? Teams that have receivers that will get physical and insert themselves in the run game, that's where explosive runs come from. And to see them have that buy-in as a lineman, that's got to fire you up because hey, we're one play away. Any part of the field with Kendra Miller back there, heck, with Max Duggan running QB runs back there, we're always one play away because we have selfless guys who will play together, put their bodies on the line for each other.
That's exactly right. And so it starts out, they have those guys outside doing that. And, of course, this offensive line is taking care of business. And it all starts, when you look at the offensive line, it starts making those calls with the center. And we're going to listen to, here in a second, we had to listen to Alana Lee, who's a guy who spoke to the media this week. But he's a center he makes the calls. He was at SMU last year, came over with offensive line coach A.J. Ricker, and has really done a nice job kind of blending those things and talking to this offensive line who was already at TCU and saying, okay, this is what Coach Ricker means when he says this.
Exactly.
So and all those things, that's right. So that's been, I think, really critical and probably not talked about enough on just the role and the value that he's brought over, not only as a player in making calls and setting protections and doing all those things, but also, as you said, as a translator, as a guy who can it was the buffer between the two and really has helped this buy-in. He also talked about his leadership role, the way he leads, and as opposed to the other leader on that offensive line, Steve Avila, who's more of a loose guy. He likes to have some fun and kick back, and they balance each other out really well. So right now, I want to jump in and listen to Alana Lee this week talking to the media about those things. Check that out, and we'll be here. Stay tuned to frogstoday.com for more of your Horned Frog coverage for this big one against the Longhorns Saturday night at 6:30. Stay tuned.
I think they just kind of loaded the box a little bit. Definitely trying to stop our run game in that first half. And then we just weren't doing our basic things. We weren't executing right. I think when we go back and watch the film, if we execute correctly and do the little things right, that first half's totally different. So it was more of an us thing than them. I would say in the spring it started to develop a little bit. It really got good in the summertime, I'd say. Just eating breakfast together every morning, eating lunch together every day. So you're constantly around the guys all day, every day. And we're all pretty similar, a bunch of competitive guys who just want to win. So when you have a group like that, I feel like the cohesiveness was pretty easy, honestly. Oh, yeah, we're constantly with each other all the time. There's not a day we don't see each other. So their D tackles are big. There's some big dudes, physical. 99's an older player. He's experienced. So I'm excited for that matchup to go against him. Their defense is, they're a veteran defense. They know what they're doing. They play hard. They play physical. So I'm excited for us to, get a good test this week. I think here and there, definitely not the whole thing, but I can see some of Coach Patterson's schemes he throws in there. Definitely. I've noticed a little bit of that on film. Yeah, obviously he's, probably the best player in the field when he steps on it. But also he's a great leader. He's a team captain. He's just great to be around. He's important for morale. So obviously on the field, he's a game changer, and we definitely want him on the field. More importantly, off the field, he takes pride in being a leader and helping guys come along. So he's just a positive guy. He's never down, he's never negative. Even when things are going bad, he's still picking guys up, trying to get them going. Before the West Virginia game, he gave the on the field speech before the game started. So just things like that. Yeah, it's fun. I feel like we're still kind of underdogs in a way. I don't know what it is. I never feel like the spreads are always, I'm not paying attention to that, but people aren't picking us by as much as you think. And I think that's the motivation for us. We still feel like underdogs. We're picked not to win this week as well. So it's a little motivation for us, I think. We like to play in the underdog role. I would say probably Steve. Definitely Steve. He's a great guy. You've met him. He has a podcast. He's a great guy. I'm more the serious, fired up one that. So me and Steve contrast in that way, which is good, I think. I'll be fired up when we need it, and he can, get us to relax when we need it. So I think we have a good balance with that. Yeah, kind of. I think so. Yeah. It usually starts with me, with pass protection. I'll make the initial call where we're going, where we're sliding. But the guys also have input. If if Coker sees something out here, he'll tell me, and then he'll say slide it this way, and we'll do that. So usually I'll start off the call, but they also have input. If they see something I don't, that will change it to that.
Welcome back into Frogs Today, frogstoday.com pregame show presented by Veritex Bank. We asked you, and you guys delivered. We have some questions that came in from the audience, and so we're going to get into that a little bit later here. But first, Marshall, I want to ask you, some defensive player to watch. We look at this game for TCU. Who's a guy we need to keep their eye on?
On the TCU side, I'd say our defensive end, Scars. I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Dylan Horton.
Dylan Horton.
Yeah.
Dylan Horton has come on the last 3 weeks. Sorry, Dylan. I'll remember you on Saturday. I promise. As a pass rushing threat, which you don't typically see in this three-man front. These are guys that you're asked to block two gaps normally, kind of hold the line up, keep them off the second level of the linebackers, and then in pass rush, we're dropping 8 so often that it's 5 against 3. But Dylan Horton has taken it upon himself to win some matchups and get pressure up the middle, not just around the edge, up the middle, which completely disrupts the quarterback's vision and the actual route that's being run. And so I would look for him against the offensive line from Texas that they're coming on. They're talented, but listen, there's still a lot of holes. They're not a line that you would look to dominate this game, and there will be opportunities there for him to win on some of these one-on-one matchups and just off kilter, throw their offense a little bit off on the random first down, a random second down, put them in behind the chains using his pass rush ability. Because the first 4 weeks I didn't see it. I saw a lot of guys who were oozing into blocks. We call it running down the middle. As a defensive lineman, you're taught to never run down the middle of the offensive line. I saw a lot of guys running down the middle. He has now chosen to turn the jets on, pick an edge, and make these offensive linemen use their feet, use their hands, play a little bit more dynamic. And so he's going to be a threat tomorrow, especially when they're least expecting it. When they drop 8, your offense is not technically expecting a whole lot of pass rush, but for him to get pressure and make a quarterback who we've talked about, inexperienced, like Quinn Ewers, throw into coverage, is going to be an opportunity for him to start the chain of events of turnovers. So Dylan Horton, I'm looking for him to have a big day on defense.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I look at him and Terrell Cooper on the other side, sort of the same thing, right? Looking for both those guys. And really what Texas likes to do to those 4-eye guys, those guys that line up on the inside eye of the tackle, they like to down block on it. So you want to make sure that they're fighting pressure with pressure,
right.
And, understand, because they like to pin and pull. So they block down, they pull guys and try to get out in that alley on the perimeter. And so they've got to do a good job forcing that thing back out so the linebackers get over the top. For me, that's where that second level of the defense, that combination of what we're going to see in the first half, second half of Shadrack Banks to D Winters and what that looks like, right? We talked about Shadrack Banks coming in this first half, his athletic ability and all the things he can do. He's somebody I want to keep an eye on that doesn't get kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit, lost in the mix during this game, and just goes out and just plays, as we talked about earlier. And then in the second half, I really that same position for D Winters. Does that first half off, is that become a good thing for him, where he's coming out with fresh legs, ready to go,
right.
Pent up aggression and energy in the second half, where he just wrecks shop, or is kind of standing around that first half? Does that hinder him in the second half? So I definitely want to look at that position, those two guys for me on defense. For on the offensive side, Marshall, thinking about an offensive guy that you want to, that stands out, you want to kind of take a closer look at for Saturday's kickoff. Who's somebody for TCU on offense that you want to keep an eye out?
Well, the obvious choice is Quentin Johnston, but he's not my pick. But I want to talk about him real quick. He's got an ankle, a leg, we'll call it. They've been very vague about it. You can see him on the sidelines last week, testing it out. He didn't seem right, and I don't know if that was more of him not wanting to go out there and not be his 100% self, or also the team kind of protecting him from himself, which you like to see. You want him to give him opportunity to play, because you can tell how much it means to him, but save him from himself, especially with a game like this looming. So the degree to which Quentin Johnston can change direction, break off his routes, be a safety valve for Max Duggan, take the top off of the defense, do all the things that we've seen him do all year, which has him in talks to be a first-round pick. We want to see him be able to do that. But to me, my pick is a guy we overlooked. We talked about him. He had a big game last week, was Darius Davis. He's a guy who can make an impact in special teams and on offense. We talked about a lot of the eye candy that TCU can use. He's a fast guy, so he threatens you from sideline to sideline. He can run traditional routes out of the slot. He can take you deep as the X receiver. We call that one of the outside receivers. He can run jet motion. You can do they call it a little flip pass, which is a little loophole, which allows it, if it's fumbled, it's an incomplete pass. But he's a guy who can take those and take it around the edge and go all the way. We saw that earlier against SMU. He's a guy who can do the ghost motion, which is the long round motion around the quarterback and the running back mesh, which could operate as a triple option as the pitch read for Max Duggan. He's so versatile, and that's just on offense. Obviously, Darius Davis, I think, an All-American on special teams to this point, if the season isn't today. And so you look for him both in the explosion opportunities for punt return and kick return, but also just making the smart play. He's a guy, he's had one fumble all year. I won't jinx him, but he's a guy who's you can depend on when, there's going to be weird conditions tomorrow. Might be a little wind. It's going to be cold, a little bit different. He's a guy you can rely on in those. If you're getting pinned deep, a team's trying to make you go the distance, put us in the best position to win. If your back foot hits the 10-yard line, let it go. Get us a touchback, get us a start at the 20. If there's an opportunity there, make a play, set your blocks up, and make an explosive play. So Darius Davis is going to have his hands on the football. He's too dangerous of a weapon to not get him involved in offense and special teams. One of the fastest players, if not the fastest player in the country. So he's a guy I expect to have a big game. Texas, we want to talk about the potential discrepancies in talent. Darius Davis, anybody in the nation would want to have him on his team. Yeah. And that's a guy who might have a chance to play on Sundays, but can make a play from anywhere on the field and has an impact in special teams and offense.
I'm with you, Marshall. I look at him. He's a guy that's obviously dangerous. They give him the freedom to take the ball in the end zone as a kick returner. As a punt returner, obviously all he needs is a little bit of room. We saw that last week. As soon as he gets around the corner, forget about it. What I'd like to see him do a little bit better in that punt return game, like you mentioned, your heels are at the 10. If that ball's behind you, don't fear catching on the 3-yard line, right? Make sure you come up running. Be a gread actor.
Absolutely.
And allow that thing to roll into the end zone.
Win an Oscar for us.
Yeah, that's right. And I know, with special teams coach Mark Tomadol, head coach Sonny Dykes having a special teams background, they'll take care of that and fix that in. He's just such a special athlete that he always wants the ball in his hands, and we can't blame him, right? I know the coach
can take everything to the house, and I love the confidence.
That's right. Yeah, so that's something we want as well for sure. And then you talked about Quentin Johnston, a guy that we don't know whether he's going to go or not. Coach Sonny Dykes did talk about it this week and said, look, we were protecting him from himself. Like you mentioned that, he said, and that to me that says a lot about a coach. Like he'd easily throw him back out there, trying to win a football game. You get caught up in that sometimes, but again, being players coach first and taking care of their players and what they're all about. And to me, that showed that, on last week's game for sure. The guy I want to look at is a guy we just heard from is Alana Lee at center. And one of the biggest reasons is Keandre Coburn for Texas. He's a nose guard. He's listed at 6'2", 344, and I think he might have been weighed in before lunchtime, to be honest, at 344.
Sopping wet,
yeah. He looks. They might have they shaved a few pounds off, but he's a guy who moves really well, pushes the pocket well in pass rush, and some of this pass protections they left the center on an island a little bit.
Yep.
Kansas State did that last week against Texas. That did not turn out so well. And so it's going to be a challenge for Alana Lee having that guy. They do play a nose guard defense quite a bit, so he'll be attacking that offhand, that snapping hand.
Yep.
And a guy who's quick off the line, has good get off. So that's going to be a matchup we're going to look to make sure they're going to give him a little bit of help at guard.
Yes.
They'll do that in pass protection quite a bit, but there are going to be some situations where Alana Lee, experienced guy, a really a fighter in there, which is good. That's going to have to step up and take care of business against a really large nose guard that can move well.
I would love to expound on that because, one of the aspects of this defense is that they oftentimes want to get guys on islands as a pass rush versus offensive line. So that could mean, kind of simulated blitzes that keep the guard occupied outside, or that could mean just bringing 5 and making each offensive lineman win his one-on-one battle, and you hope we have enough guys that are better than your guys. And so Alana Lee is going to have opportunities, but all across the board, they put guys in positions to succeed, both as pass rushers, and they put you in a position to fail. Like they stress test the offensive lines all year. They've been bringing a lot of blitzes, linebackers coming, looping, picking. Listen, a lot of the influences are from New England and Bill Belichick, and I played for Bill Belichick, and that defense, it stress tests your fundamentals, but also your scheme. In offensive line play, we're always trying to have a lot of 2-on-1s, a lot of double teams that, they move from double team to double team, but you want 2-on-1s, you want to slow momentum down, you want guys helping each other out. And these defenses are trying to prevent that. They're trying to put as much stress on the offensive line as possible. So Alana Lee getting the guys in the right scheme, the right protection scheme, and then he himself having to block a behemoth like that up front is going to tell the tale early in the game if Max can get in the rhythm, and then late in the game to score touchdowns to keep up with this Texas offense.
Yeah, you make a good point, Marshall. You see that from the Patriots, those linebackers mugged up, and then they'll drop out guys. The other side guy will run. They'll make them commit to that linebacker.
Yes.
They'll show pass rush and back off. That's a lot what you're going to see from this Pete Kwiatkowski defense for the Longhorns for sure, and that's going to stress them as well. So it's funny because a lot of times people talk about one-on-one matchups and winning those matchups and creating matchups. And really now modern football is all about matchups.
Yep.
But when you talk about that, it always goes to the perimeter. Everybody thinks, how do you isolate a certain receiver against a certain DB? But those matchups are along the line of scrimmage as well, and trying to create those on defense. We can get your best pass rush matchups versus certain linemen. And again, that's where I think Coach Gary Patterson comes into play, where he knows the strength and weaknesses a lot of these offensive linemen and trying to attack those guys and those individual matchups along front. So, I think that's going to be key for this one as well. Look, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're going to answer your questions as promised. Hopefully they stayed on track about the game, Marshall. I've seen a couple interesting questions in there. We're going to answer those questions and then give you our final thoughts and predictions for this TCU Horned Frog and Texas Longhorn matchup. Stay tuned to Frogs Today and frogstodays.com. We'll be right back.
Say hello to the water of tomorrow. Richard's Rainwater. Richard's Rainwater is 100% rain, refreshing, renewable, and the only ingredient we use in our water. Why rain? Because everyone deserves access to clean water, and rain is a 100% renewable resource available everywhere. Drink the rain. Save the planet. Shop now at richardsrainwater.com.
Dave's Hot Chicken is a cult favorite and now has 2 locations in Fort Worth, Bryant Irvin Road on I-20 and Berry Street at TCU, both owned and operated by Horned Frogs. Mention the Frogs Today show and get 10% off anytime, and order online at daveshotchicken.com.
Welcome back into Frogs Today. It is frogstoday.com. Pre-game show presented by Veritex Bank. I'm David Bowden. Joined alongside here is Marshall Newhouse. And Marshall, as promised, we're going to answer some of these fan questions at Frogs Today and see what they have to, what they're curious about this game. Make sure it's about football, though, Marshall.
Yeah, we'll keep it about the game for sure.
All right, so what do we got first here?
First question is Quinn Ewers or Max Duggan?
Come on, is that really a question?
They asked it. I don't know who that was.
All right. Well, hey, listen, they asked it. It deserves an answer. If you asked it at home, Max Duggan all the way. And for a multitude of reasons. One, this is a guy who is tough as nails. He fits this team culture right now. I think Max Duggan, for all that he does in terms of his ability to throw the ball, his ability to get out of the pocket, how fast he is in the QB run game, all those things, moving nakeds, running, all that stuff. Really, for me, it's his leadership ability and the way he carries this program.
Yes.
And talks to those offensive linemen. If they miss an assignment or miss a block, he's the first one over there. Slapping them on the helmet, telling them, "Don't worry about it. Hey, I got you. We got this." Constantly encouraging his teammates, and that goes so far, right? You look at what he does with that. He's not a guy that'll get in guys' faces and challenge them that way. He is positive all the time. And he's also willing to stick his nose in there. I think when they see, when it comes to the offensive line or just his teammates across the board, even the defense on the sideline, all of a sudden he meets a linebacker and he lowers his shoulder and trucks a linebacker, which he's shown on, put on tape and has done at various stadiums. That fires the entire team up. Not just his teammates on the field, but you can see the sideline erupts. Nothing gets a team going like your quarterback willing to stick his nose in there.
Absolutely, true lightning rod. Just the emotional leader of your team. He's been through so much. Started camp as your backup. A guy who chose to stay here, had every opportunity to leave in the transfer portal with the rules as we see them now, and just loved TCU so much and has stayed. So absolutely, you see why the team loves Max. You see why he loves the team. It's a marriage that has worked out so far, and you've enjoyed watching him play. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you look at Quinn Ewers, and look, he's got all the arm talent in the world. He can sling it 70 yards, can do all those things, but he's got a long way to go as a redshirt freshman. We'll see, and I think he certainly has the potential to get there, but he's just not there yet. Doesn't have the experience and the starts behind him that a Max Duggan does. Okay, right. I got one for you.
Okay.
Looking at this thing, talking about Max Duggan, it says here, does he have a realistic possibility of winning a Heisman Trophy?
And I say he does. Listen, he's already kind of cleared the hurdle of being in the talk. And all it's going to take, it takes a few just big games that he's very capable of doing to get right there in the top 5. I think he's took a couple steps back. His numbers have been dipped a little low. But at the end of the day, TCU's winning. So the priority, and if you asked him, he would say the priority is TCU winning football games. But he absolutely is a few games away from being right there in the talk, like you said, going to New York. Being part of that presentation. He's earned the right to be in the discussion. He's on the fringe, but all it takes is a couple big games from Max Duggan, which we've seen, and he's very capable of. So he could be right there, absolutely.
One more for you, Marshall. It says, what have you seen from this TCU offensive line that makes you think it can handle this Texas front this week?
Yeah, you've had a TCU line that as a whole has improved steadily over the year. Has stayed healthy. They've been a similar group all year. They've had a couple dings here and there, but guys that have grown together and have won these tough games and been the reason why TCU has stayed in these games. And I think as the game goes on, they're a group that continues to coalesce and continues to grind and lean on guys, and I think they take pride in that. So with a running back like Kendre Miller, with a quarterback like Max Duggan, as the game goes on, they continue to kind of bond and grow and gain momentum. And I love the way that they have finished games. They finish blocks and they finish games. You see guys throwing guys to the ground, playing with attitude. That's stuff that linemen look forward to. That's a dream. And as a running back, I imagine Kendre Miller loves that stuff too, because there's less guys for him to have to run through. And so this offensive line has shown they're very capable and a very competent and top to bottom Big 12 of taking over games, allowing explosive runs, salting the clock at the end of the game, and providing protection for Max Duggan. So they've shown it. They've got to do it again against a really talented front, a multiple front. They're going to see a lot of things thrown at them, but they're absolutely capable.
All right, I'll take this last question here. Let's see. It says Texas has some weaknesses in the secondary. How can the Frogs take advantage? I talked a little bit earlier about that play action. I think, against a quarters coverage like this, you can get behind safeties, right? Yes, they will insert themselves in the run game, but with that, they're also going to be running. If you can get their eye discipline out of whack and you can start really, and Max Duggan does a nice job of this. If you notice, when he's trying to influence a defender, he's burning his eyes to whatever defender he wants to influence. So
Sure.
He'll do a nice job putting his eyes on those safeties, at that third level. riding the play action, getting those guys to suck up, and now they do have the talent on the outside to get on top of those guys on some post routes and things where they can take some shots down the field. So I think that's a big one. Also, they've done a really nice job on the play action in terms of their protection, right? They do a great job. They run this over and over again. It had quite an impact, and that's pulling a guard in protection, and running sort of a power play look where that's right. And that pulling guard will then take that outside gap, that C gap. He's responsible. Everybody else blocks down as they would in the power run game. They've done a nice job of that, and that really influences not only the secondary but also those linebackers to suck up. To me, Marshall, there's nothing better in a play action than having a puller. That's a true influence of not only in the backfield, but it also influences their keys up front. So I think that's going to be a big one for me. So that's a question there. I think they asked about horns down. Can we do a horns down? But I don't want to get fined by the Big 12. I know
they're sensitive about that.
Right.
We'll leave that to the guys on the field.
Yeah, we'll wait till the Longhorns change leagues, and we'll do that. But they do get a little sensitive about that. So we'll leave that alone for just now, for right now. But to finish up, Marshall, I just want to kind of get your final thoughts on this one and a game score prediction before we finish up. What do you think about this matchup, and how do you think it'll end?
Listen, we've talked about the spread and the bigness of this game. TCU ranked 4, Texas ranked 18. There's a lot on the line. Listen, this is the competition committee, the college football playoff committee has made it very clear that fair or not, TCU is going to need to run the table to get into the college football playoff, and this is another step in that direction. Texas is looking to get themselves back in the picture for the Big 12 championship. There's a lot on the line on Saturday, and so playing here at DKR, it's going to be 100,000 plus. It's going to be raucous. It's going to be a great moment. Listen, the line is at 7. It's about a score. You take a little bit away for the home team, but this is as close of a matchup. Teams that are very similar in a lot of different ways. But again, I think the TCU has earned their 9-0 mark. They've earned these wins, and they're as much talented as anybody Texas can bring out there. But I think it's going to be a close game. It's going to be a hard-fought game. Again, we're getting into football weather, the cold stuff. That's where I want the big guys to take over. And I believe it'll be a little bit low scoring. The lines are close to 70. TCU's been around that area all year. I think it's not going to get to that point, or it'll be right around that point. There's going to be, guys kind of feeling their way a little bit through this game because of the gravity of the situation. So my final score prediction is TCU 34, Texas 31. Close game.
I like it. I'm somewhere in that neighborhood as well. When I look at this game, we talked about earlier, is can they withstand that fast start from Texas? That scripted series, whatever they come out in, they kind of makes Quinn Ewers comfortable. I know when he goes through, at the end of the week during practice and then those walkthroughs, he knows exactly what they're rehearsing, that exact script when they go through there. So that he pretty much knows, unless they get, behind the chains, this is what we're running. So he's comfortable with it. He's okayed it, right, with his offense coordinator. He's talked, which is really head coach Steve Sarkisian, and along with offensive line coach Kyle Flood. He sat down there, so he's familiar, he's comfortable, and that's what you got to do with a talented young quarterback. So, can TCU hold that off early? And if they can, once Texas settles in to their normal offense, I really think this TCU defense has been stingy and has shown that they bow up, especially in those second halves and late in games. And so if they can do that, I agree with you. I think it's a real close one. I have it around the same way. For me, I'm looking at a Texas 31. TCU 31, Texas 28. Okay. So, again, a field goal difference. I think 7.5 is way too big of a spread either way. I understand a few points to the home team and all that, but that's where I'm at on this one. It's going to be a close ball game. It's going to be a heck of a lot of fun. And tonight at 6:30 kickoff in DKR, it's going to be a blast. And it's been a blast today with you, Marshall. I enjoyed it. A lot of fun being down here in Austin, getting to see a bunch of TCU alumni at this event. Has been a blast, and just to see the enthusiasm, here and the enthusiasm around this football program right now is to me it's such a high, and we hope we can keep this thing rolling at 10-0. And so make sure you stay tuned to Frogs Today and frogstoday.com for all your coverage. We're going to have you covered during the game. I'll be in a forum. Make sure you get in there, subscribe, get on frogstoday.com and talk to us. We'll go back and forth about the game and have a good conversation about breakdowns live during the game. Of course, you'll have all your writers there, Jeff Wilson, Jamie Plunkett, Melissa Trebwasser, Drew Davison, all of them are there as well. Monday night, Dissecting the Frogs premieres. I'm on that show with Maggie Hale, and we'll have coverage of this Texas game and breaking down the game and what you saw. And, of course, throughout the week, State of the Frogs Tuesday night. with Coach Sonny Dykes and Brian Estridge. Frogs Today, Thursday, Friday on our YouTube channel. There's a lot. It's jam-packed. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and ask any kind of questions. Engage. We like that
love
stuff.
The engagement. Absolutely.
Yeah, love that stuff. Ask any questions. We'll go back and forth and try and give you the best answers we can come up with. And I'll have some questions maybe back for you as well. So stay tuned to frogstoday.com. Again, for Marshall Newhouse, I'm David Bowden. We enjoyed it. Let's go get another win for 10-0. Stay tuned to frogstoday.com.